This is the Get Savvy Show, brought to you by the Reluctant Leader Academy. I'm your host, Mark Terrell, and on each episode, I'm going to help you get savvy to allow you and your business to grow. We'll be focusing on the three elements that lead to business success: your mindset, your processes, and your skills. Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Get Savvy Show, brought to you by the Reluctant Leader Academy, and I am your host, Mark Terrell. And today I'm going to be talking to Shelley Fishel about being productive, and in particular, how to use Microsoft 365. We were talking just before we started about, when you buy a car, but it's only when you sell it that you find out exactly how to use it and all the things that you should have used all the time you owned it. I'm a bit like that with 365, so I'll be interested to get some tips from Shelley as to things that I'm not using in 365, which I should be, and I'm probably paying for as well. That's the important thing. So without further ado, let's bring Shelley on to join us. Shelley, welcome.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for inviting me along. It's a pleasure.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm looking forward to it. I'm sure there's going to be great value here because there's obviously a lot of people that use 365, and I'm sure we're not using it to its maximum. But before we get stuck into that, I always ask my guests just to give a quick intro as to what they do and all that sort of stuff. So over to you.
Okay, so I'm an IT trainer, and I've been doing it for over 20 years now, which is kind of a bit scary that it's so long. But before that, I worked for a charity, which is kind of how I got into it, because I got fed up with all the bits of paper that were flying around. And we're talking 1998. So computer systems weren't what they are now, but they were certainly better than lots of sticky notes all over the place. And I had to, in my job at the charity, I had to organize a fundraising event. And it just drove me insane because it was impossible to track everything. So I taught myself with a book one weekend how to use Excel and Access then. I wowed my colleagues when I came in and showed them how we could streamline what we were doing. And my love affair with Microsoft Office kind of was born. And then went on to work for a training company and eventually set up my own training business. So that's how I got into it. Mm-hmm. And I just loved the challenge of streamlining and making things happen quicker.
So as with most things, it's a little bit by accident, but then you finally realise what your niche was and what you really loved doing, and ultimately that's the sweet spot for all of us, is find something that we sort of really like doing and it doesn't feel like work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fabulous. Okay, great. So we'll come back to the topic in a while, but before we do that or delve into that, we're going to look at your motivators. You've completed a motivational map like all my guests, and on the screen you'll see Shelley's top 3 motivators. So number 1, creator, is about being innovative and bringing new ideas into being and solving problems. The searcher is about making a difference, doing something worthwhile and meaningful. And the expert is about having a specialist knowledge and mastery of a topic. So Shelley, where do these and how do these 3 motivators, your top 3, show up in your business, do you think?
Well, it's really interesting because as we were talking just before we came on air, I never would have said that a couple of years ago, if you'd have asked me whether I was a creator or a creative person, I would have said no. But in the last 2 years, all I have done is create things. I've been creating online courses, creating webinars, creating face-to-face trainings. So I'm creating all the time. I've got lots of books that I've written. That's a very creative process as well. So creation shows up every day in my business. I'm always creating something. Today I've been working on a workshop I'll be delivering live in a couple of weeks. And so I've been very creative today. It's been a bit of a long day creating today. Mm-hmm. But yeah, the searcher, that's part of the creation process, because in order for my courses to make sense to my audience, they have to have a meaning and they have to be relevant. So I'm always looking for what is it that they're trying to solve in order for my course to make sense. So a lot of my training courses are set in a coffee shop, just because most people understand it's a microcosm of a business. And, in Excel, for example, I have a book on Excel, which is set in a coffee shop. There's a story, but there's also, how does the business owner, Matt, build his business using Excel to manage it in the background? So that's kind of taking what I do and finding meaning for people that need to learn that stuff. And of course, I've always done a lot of personal development, not just personal development, but, learning my topics so that I am an expert, because I never wanted to be one of these people that say, yeah, I can teach you how to use PowerPoint, but I've never learned how to use PowerPoint properly. So I think that's really important as well.
And
so there you go.
we spoke again about our shared motivations, and our top three are the same. So I share exactly the same three top motivators as Shelley, and exactly what she's just said makes absolute sense to me, because Creator is about problem solving, and wanting to make a difference is something that's very much connected to that. And being a specialist is great, and learning is great, but sometimes we can get, I don't know whether this, you resonate with this, but we can get carried away and just knowledge building for the sake of knowledge building.
Rabbit holes. Lots of rabbit
holes. So
So
it's one of the things that is really useful with this is to be aware of our potential to go down those rabbit holes, and hopefully stop ourselves doing that. It's like, constantly booking on the next course just because you want to do it. Sometimes you need someone to say, well, hang on a minute, you might want to do it, but actually is it necessary, and is it actually serving you, whether it's you or your business?
Yeah.
So that's all great. Yeah. Anything else that came out?
No, I was just saying, just thinking about the last point that you made. Somebody we both know said, are you procrastinating?
Yes.
And I think I must be guilty of that at some point, procrastinating, because you start to learn something to teach it, and then you think, oh, well, I could do that as well, and I can add that on, and this. You end up down that learning rabbit hole.
I'll have to remember that. I think I know who that might have been. And it's
Yeah,
interesting because
sure
at the moment,
do.
I went on a course a couple of years ago, and there's come up this new, fresh version with a bonus for previous people that have been on it. And I was thinking, I'd love to do it, but it doesn't make any sense whatsoever to do it. So I was going to have to just try and ignore all the sales copy that's coming my way. Great, thank you for sharing that, Shelley. So let's dive into what we're here to talk about, and that's essentially being productive, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very much, when I first started training this stuff back in 1998, so you would have businesses, I worked for a training company, people would send a group of 5 or 6 people or 8 people out from their office to a training company. They'd sit in a classroom all day and they'd learn Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, whatever it was. And it was necessary because people didn't have computers at home. They didn't know how to use this stuff, and businesses were seeing the value of the productivity gains that this kind of software would bring. So they would send everybody out on a training course. Fast forward 10 years even, so the 2010-ish, that's tailing off. That starts to tail off because people say, oh, they learn it at school. More people have got computers at home. And I remember doing a presentation for somebody, and I found an image of a child with a keyboard, like my keyboard like this. And it looked like the child was glued to the keyboard. And I captioned it, it's as if we're born with a keyboard instead of fingers now. That's kind of how people feel you should be. So when you go into a new job now, they kind of expect you to know it all. Mm. And the thing is, nobody's teaching you, because they say you learn it at school, but then I'm told by people who've been through school that they only learn little bits and they don't learn a business application. So they might learn how to make a pretty presentation about their summer holiday, but then they've got to translate that to how do they make that pitch presentation about the new product. And it's that's what's not, schools not teaching business skills. They're teaching whatever schools teach. It's a long time since I was at school, so I've got no idea what they teach anymore. But,
no, I think the same. But yeah. Essentially, you're using the practicalities of 365 and all that comes with it. So I think it'd be worth just covering what comes with it. I know there's different packages, but there are things that come with all packages, I think. So what are we talking about here? Just so everybody knows
Yeah.
what we're talking about with
So,
regards to that.
so the basic premise of 365 is we're talking about it from a business point of view, not from a home or personal point of view, because there's two flavors. So on the business flavor, the basic package will give you Word, Excel, Outlook, PowerPoint, and a few other bits and pieces. And then you have desktop versions of that software. You also have online versions of that software, plus lots of other packages. So you have things like Bookings, which is an online booking calendar, which connects into your Outlook calendar and also connects to Microsoft Teams. So Microsoft Teams is another application, or app as they're now called, that you can bring in and use in your business. And instead of using Zoom for your meetings, you can quite happily use Microsoft Teams. And Bookings interfaces with both your calendar and with Teams. So you can book in your meetings and they show up directly in your calendar. So you can start them from your Outlook calendar or from Teams, whichever is more convenient to you at the time, or even from the email invitation. You can go from there. So it's things like that. There are other things. You have OneDrive for your file storage, and you have SharePoint if you're running a larger business, with more than one person, and you have stuff that you need to share, then it should really go in SharePoint. You can share stuff from OneDrive, but if it's really going to be shared all the time, then SharePoint's where it should be. So there's all those things. Plus there's Planner and To Do, and Microsoft To Do is a lovely little package for all your to-do lists. And it talks to Outlook. So when you create tasks in Outlook, they'll show up in To Do. And when you create things in To Do, they'll show up in your tasks in Outlook. You can even add due dates to things and notes and all sorts of bells and whistles. So it's about getting everything to talk to each other, really, and realizing that it does all talk to each other. So
that's interesting you mentioned Bookings, because that was something I came across about a year ago, and I was paying more for a Bookings software than I was paying for Office. And then I realized that I had something within Office that actually did what I was paying for. So obviously I cancelled that quickly. And I think a lot of people don't realize that these things are included, and they're really good. They're not just something that's just been thrown together. They're very, really useful. And I use Bookings really extensively, in that you can set up different types of bookings. That's the thing. It's not just one type. You can have different types, lengths of bookings, and all that sort of stuff. So I highly recommend Bookings. So if we go back to I suppose the heart of 365, I guess, is the Excel, Word, and PowerPoint. Would it be?
Yeah, Excel, Word, PowerPoint, and Outlook. So they would be your core packages, and most people scratch the surface of all of those. You do what you have to do. So it's also going to depend on the type of work that you're doing as to which of those packages is going to be the one you favor or spend most time in. I mean, we'll all spend a lot of time in Outlook because email is how the world runs nowadays, although that's changing, because with the onset of Teams coming in, a lot of email is a lot of that communication is coming out of the inbox and is being handled in messaging apps like Teams. So it's taking a bit of the burden out of the inbox and making that a bit better, which is very welcome. But so it's Word, Excel, PowerPoint, depending on what you're doing. So if you're a lawyer, you'll probably spend most of your time in Word, doing your legal documents. And then you're going to need a particular set of skills or knowledge, special legal numbering and all of those kind of things. If you're in finance, then you're going to spend your time in Excel, and you'll be creating spreadsheets that track things or add things up or do whizzy things. And again, if you're a salesperson, then you're likely to be spending most of your time in PowerPoint, creating pitches or product demos or whatever it might be, selling something. If you're a trainer or a coach, you're going to spend a lot of time in probably everything, because for example, when I create my online courses, I use Excel to set up my structure because it's a nice table and I can list things nicely there. So I set up my structure. I've got my columns for what's going to go in each section of the course, and then I keep track of how long each section is when I record it. But I might write stuff in Word when I'm trying to figure out what's going in it. and then I'll use PowerPoint for the slides that go with the recordings. So you're kind of in every, depending on what you're doing, you will use different elements of it.
Yeah, sounds
So
familiar.
that's
Familiar.
I'm
So
sure
you've
it
alluded
does.
to it there. So you create courses. Essentially, that's what you do. You create courses so that people can pick the course that's right for them, essentially.
Yeah, so I've got a range of online courses all around Microsoft Office, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, and Teams. And, people can go to my website, go to my course directory and pick the one they want, or buy all of them if they want as a bundle. But they are quite time consuming to create. And, anything. I think people don't realize that we as coaches, trainers, how much preparation goes into what we actually deliver.
Mm-hmm.
We don't just stand and deliver. It's not like that. I was listening to a really good book recently. I was listening to it, not reading it, on my walks, and it was Atomic Habits by James Clear. And he talked about Steve Martin's journey to his success as a comedian, and he really started age 10.
Mm-hmm.
So he didn't get to be a stand-up comedian that could bring the house down till he was quite a lot later. And I think none of us realize how much effort goes into anybody who is successful, because we don't see what goes on behind the scenes, do we?
Well, they say it takes a long time to become an overnight success, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
with anything, that there's a stuff where you've got to start. And that's an interesting talk. Where do we start with these things? I mean, I've created courses, and not to the extent that you have, Shelley, but it's one of those things that you don't know where to start. So it'd be interesting if you can share, if you're happy to share. You've sort of alluded to it already. The sort of that process of breaking it down into little steps. I suppose that's essentially what you're doing, isn't it?
Yeah. So, for example, if I just mention one of my courses because it's easy to hang it on something.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, I have a course called Work Smarter with Style, which is a Microsoft Word course, and it's about using styles in Word. And it came about because I realized how much time so many people were wasting on formatting their documents when there's a really simple way of solving that issue. And it was brought home to me when I worked for the training company. So this was about 15 years ago. I went in, sat with this girl, and she worked for a department in the NHS. And she had to collate reports from 3 or 4 different people and pull them together and produce this kind of all singing, all dancing, lovely report. But each of these people would send her a document with their own styling in it. And it would take her a couple of days to reformat everything and then pull it all together into the NHS document style. We spent an hour and a half together, and she at the end of that, and this is 15 years ago, she could do that same task in about half an hour. So that was what sparked my interest in that particular one. So if I know that I want to teach somebody how to get better with Microsoft Word styles in particular, then I've got to sit down and figure, okay, so what's the objective of the course? Well, that's to get better with styles. What does that mean? What does the person need to know in order to get better with styles? Well, they've got to have a basic idea about formatting, because otherwise they won't understand what a style is. So there's a bit about that, and then they have to understand how you use the styles that come with Word, how you modify them, and how you create your own, for example. And then how do you then apply that to a document? So whether you're starting from scratch or somebody gives you a document and you want to change what it looks like. And then, because I'm talking to people who might be working with different clients or different departments, they might have different style sets for different clients or different departments. How can you do that quickly so you don't have to start from scratch each time? So that's kind of my process. It's a kind of starting from the top. This is what we need to achieve, and then what do you need to know in order to achieve that?
It's that classic start with the end in mind, isn't it? And the 3 elements I talk about is what we're doing, how we're going to do it, and most importantly, remembering why we're doing it. What is the outcome that we are trying to achieve? And obviously, in your case, it's creating a course that's easily consumed and can be, people can use straight away and get the value back straight away. A great example there, because I think those with all these things, I think the problem with them is there is so much you can do with them, and there's so many functionalities that you just get lost in them. And I'm just in awe sometimes. I watch YouTube channels where they're demonstrating something and they're creating something on screen, but sometimes they do it so quick that you can't keep up. And I suppose that's one thing you've got to do it at a speed that is right, and so speed's important. But also, you've just alluded to the fact that you listen to a book rather than read it.
Yeah.
So we've also got the situation where people sometimes would prefer to watch or listen or read. So that's another thing you've got to take into account, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, all my courses, certainly the later ones, the earlier ones, because I wasn't so aware when I did that. I also wanted to get them out there, so I didn't pay quite as much attention to the early ones as you get better. It's like anything, you get better as you go along. So my courses have captions. So every course would have 2 videos. One video doesn't have captions for those people that really don't like them and they're just going to listen to it. But there's another video that has captions, and that's because some people might prefer to read, or they might be listening with the sound off because they're in an office environment, for example, or somebody else has got the TV on. So there's no point having me nattering away at them. And so they'll watch that. And then there's a transcript as well. So you've got all of those modalities covered, and helps make it more accessible to people as well.
That's interesting. And going back to that expert motivator, I've done a leadership course, which I'm sort of dying to get back to re-record because it's not as good as my recent courses. But it's one of those things you want to do it, but you've got to try and stop yourself doing it for the sake of it. There's nothing wrong with the content. It's just what it looks like and what it sounds like, because I've learned a lot. And that's the thing, when you learn stuff, you want to put that into your new content, don't you, and keep it up to date so it's sort of in line and not embarrassing. It's like and so we're going to talk about, we've both done podcasts. I suppose this is like I heard the term today, vodcast. So I suppose this is a podcast, and you've done a podcast, I've done a podcast. So let's just allude to that. Just tell us about your podcast firstly before I...
Yeah, so I have a podcast called Virtually Amazing, the podcast, and it's targeted at virtual assistants, tomorrow's VA, which is the PA of today being the VA of tomorrow, VA being a virtual assistant. So she's the same as a PA, she just doesn't sit in your office, basically. So she could be an executive assistant, a personal assistant, but she's virtual because she's somewhere else. And I wanted to create this podcast to give VAs a voice, really. There's a lot of talk about PAs and EAs and, in the big organizations, but VA is a bit of an unsung hero. And I wanted to give them a voice and also to interview guest experts. So we have people that, VA royalty come along and give their, experts. And the truth is they're really good business tips. The bottom line is, everybody's running a business, whether they're doing audio typing or designing your website, they're running a business. So it's all business tips. And we've had some fantastic guests. We've also had various VAs come on and talk about where they are and how they got there, what motivated them to leave full-time employment and start their own career. And those are really fascinating. And it's a free-flowing chat. I've had somebody say it's a bit like sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and listening to 2 of your friends natter away, because I have a co-host who is a VA, and we just kind of go with the flow, and it's great fun. It's great fun.
Just to repeat, where do you find that on podcasting, obviously?
Okay, so it's on all good podcast players. So you'll find it on Apple, you'll find it on Spotify, you'll find it on Podcast Addict, on all of those. It's also on YouTube, on the Tomorrow's VA YouTube channel. So it goes out in 2 locations, and it's released every Monday. And we batch record them so that I'm not spending my entire week editing them. So we do a batch, and then I'll release them as they go.
Yeah, and what I was alluding to before I talked about the podcast was that when you look back at or listen to your first episode of anything, you think, what was I thinking? What was I doing? But we've got to start somewhere, haven't we? And I suppose with everything that we do, we've really got to get over ourselves a little bit and realise that it's not going to be perfect first time round. You've got to work at it. So is that something that you sort of struggle with a little bit with? I say struggle with. Is it something you have to be aware of, I should think?
Yeah, I think so. I think we all do, especially if we're kind of out there in front of people. We always want to be better than we were last time.
Mm.
I don't know about you, but I'm always, critical of myself when I finish a webinar or a podcast or whatever it might be. Was I the best me I could be at that time, basically? Did I deliver the best learning? Did everybody get it? Did they hate me? All those kind of things that go through your mind when you're in front of people. And usually, though, I often, maybe not usually, but often, I get so wrapped up in what I'm teaching that I forget about all of that because I'm so excited about what I'm doing. I'm just kind of all over the show. So, yeah, quite fun.
Good stuff. Right, I'm going to put you on the spot because we haven't mentioned this before, but I think probably it'd be a good idea to get some top tips from you, Shelley. I'm sure it's not put yourself. I'm not really putting you on the spot. I'm sure this is meat and drink or whatever they call it, with regards to what you do. So,
Okay.
let's help those people out that have paying out 365 licenses. Where do you see is the most people are ignoring where they can get most value that they're not getting at the moment?
Investing in learning what they've got. I think. I mean, I'm a trainer. I have to say that, but on a serious note, if you don't know what it can do, then you're never going to make the best use of it. Things like, for example, if you're an Outlook user, then just a simple tip for navigating around Outlook. So let's say you're in your inbox and you need to get to the calendar. You're going to click on the calendar icon, but it's much quicker to press the control key and the number 2, and that will jump you to your calendar. If you're on a Mac, that would be the command key and the number 2. And guess what? 3 takes you to people, 4 takes you to tasks, and so on. And then 1 takes you back to the inbox. When you're in your calendar, this is something for Windows users. You can use the Alt key with a number, and that will display that number of days in your calendar. So they're just little things that you wouldn't know yourself, and unless somebody showed it to you, you probably would never find out. And some of the best tips I've learned is because I've seen somebody do it. And I say, hang on a minute, how did you do that? So those sort of things. And, utilize Microsoft Bookings. Take 5 minutes to set up a booking calendar and see how simple it really is. I have 2 or 3 different services, they're called, and then I have a whole separate calendar. So I have an online calendar where clients can book training for groups. It doesn't create a meeting. It's just a placeholder meeting. It doesn't create all the links and everything, but it's a placeholder. And that allows me to block those days in my diary that are available, or block out the ones that are not available for that particular service. So it's called my training calendar. And I just shared that calendar with a client who wants to book a training session rather than my general calendar where they might book at a very inconvenient time of day for me.
Yeah.
So it's about managing all the things together.
Yeah,
And
I use that exact system for booking this show. So get that.
Yeah, it was really, really smooth. But I would also say, if you are more than one person in your business, whether that's all in the same business or whether you have a virtual assistant who is maybe not at your business but works with you, then you really can't go wrong using Microsoft Teams. It will really streamline your life. I use it with my VA. I have a VA. She looks after my social media. I'm all over the place on social media. And Zita does a great job looking after the imagery that goes out and the frequency. But it means that all of our communication is done inside Teams. So before we started using Teams, I might get a Facebook Messenger message from her, or a WhatsApp, or a text message, or an email. And it was impossible to keep track of what I said, what she said, who said what when. By using Teams, everything is in one place. We have channels for different things. So if I want to talk to her about the blog, the message goes in the blog channel. If I want to talk to her about the newsletter, it goes in the newsletter channel. And it's just really cut down the clutter of everything else. It also means we can share documents, because any documents that you've got stored in Teams are available to all members of your team. So it means there's none of that emailing documents backwards and forwards and having 600 versions of things. So that's another tip that I would, recommend.
So really, what you're saying there really is that in today's world, we have to collaborate, don't we? And whether we're collaborating with a VA, we're collaborating with a client, whatever it is. And the easier we can make that so that it's all in one place, it makes far more sense. And like you say, having emails, and then it tends to like jump onto like LinkedIn messages, and then next minute there's something else, and it's just impossible to keep it. So what you described there makes absolute sense. But I've never really thought about using Teams for that. So that's definitely opened up my eyes with regards to using Teams a bit more. That's brilliant. So sadly, Shelley, our time is running out. So I think before you leave us, I think you should give us an opportunity to point us in the direction how to connect with you. So over to you with that.
Okay, well, you'll find me everywhere. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm Shelley Fishel everywhere. I'm on Twitter. I have 2 Twitter accounts, a bit greedy there. I'm Shelley Fishel or @Tomorrow's VA. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Pinterest. I'm on LinkedIn. As I said, my website is tomorrowsva.com, and my course directory is coursedirectory.tomorrowsva.com. And I'm Shelley at Tomorrow's VA. So it's quite simple. Just look for Tomorrow's VA. You can find me.
Fantastic. Pinterest is an interesting one. That's not many guests mention that one, so that's cool. Thank you, Shelley, for your time today. It's been really useful. I've got lots from it. Hopefully everybody else that has been watching, there's been some people that have been watching, I noticed. And also, if you catch this on replay, then obviously check out Shelley, because she's well worth checking out with regards to, especially if you're a VA or you are using Microsoft 365. Good stuff. Thank you, Shelley. And again, thank you for your time, and hopefully catch up with you very soon.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Good stuff. So I got loads from that, made lots of notes, especially with hotkeys and all that sort of stuff, those time savers that I didn't really realise, which I'll be playing around with. Looks like the graphics have gone a bit weird on my screens, but forgive me for that. So thank you for those that joined us live. And obviously, if you catch this on replay, then don't hesitate to reach out, ask a question, and either me or Shelley will get back to you if there's something that you'd like answered, particularly about 365 or VAs or anything like that. Then reach out, and hopefully we can help you. Going back to motivations, if you're interested in finding out what motivates you, and I suggest you should, because ultimately that's what gets us out of bed in the morning, check out my website, which is thereluctantleader.academy. And the courses page, go to how to stay energized at work. And if you use LinkedIn or Facebook as a coupon code, you'll save 25% on the how to stay energized at work course. And you will understand then what gets you out of bed in the morning. Make sure that those things are being fulfilled, and you'll understand how important it is to get the energy to keep you going, so that when things do get tough, you have the energy to deal with it. Great. So I've really enjoyed this episode, as always. Thank you for those who joined us. And until the next episode, have a great day and see you next time.